Hi there, my name is Victoria and I'm a training and development specialist here at Formlabs. This is the 4L Quick Start video training. In this training, we're going to go through setting up your printer to make sure it's ready for a print, actually starting a print and the steps leading up to it, and then finishing a print after the print has been completed, things like washing, post-curing, and part removal. As we're getting started, I want to note that we're not going to be covering unboxing the printer or preparing the space to accommodate your 4L. And I also won't be going over kind of how to create a 3D model that you can use through Preform to upload to your printer. For resources related to those, I recommend checking out our support site, support.formlabs.com, for additional information. Alrighty, that said, let's jump on in. So with the printer now on, it's greeting us with the onboarding screens that I'd like to walk through now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Get Started. First, I'm going to select my region. I'm in the United States, and so I'm going to hit Next. So the 4L has an external antenna that's used for a Wi-Fi connection. That came in your box when you unboxed your 4L, and you can install it on the back left of the printer to ensure that the Wi-Fi has a stable connection. All you have to do there is screw the antenna on and bend it upwards. I'll also note here that your printer has the ability to connect directly to your computer through a USB connection, but you can also use a hardwire internet connection using an Ethernet cable directly to the printer. And all of those connections are found also at the back left of the printer by the internet antenna. Alrighty, so with that installed, I'm going to go ahead and hit Next. Next, the printer is prompting us to connect to our Wi-Fi. You can scroll through this list to find your personal local connection. And I've already connected ours here now, but you can just tap the name, enter a password if necessary, and then it'll let you know if it's connected by saying the word connected to the right of the name of the Wi-Fi. I want to emphasize here that if you have Form 4BL, you must have a network connection at least during your onboarding process of setting up your printer. This will ensure that you're able to use your biocompatible materials down the line. If you don't have a network connection during this process, you may not be able to do so. So, set up your network connection during your onboarding, and then afterwards, if you prefer an offline connection, once you've completed the onboarding screens, you can then shut off your internet connection. Great, so let's move on to the next screen. So on the screen, it is prompting us as to whether or not we'd like to enable the camera. So the Form 4L does come with a camera equipped to view your prints throughout the printing process. This camera can be found on the inside of the door, right down here, looking up into this area. You can see for yourself in the thumbnail on the screen. Having the camera enabled is completely optional, but if you'd like to have it enabled, the printer can save some post-print photos for you, allow you to monitor your print remotely, as well as create some really awesome time lapses that are kind of my favorite feature. But if you're curious about our data policy, just to feel more comfortable, you can check out our website for more. All right, let's go to the next screen. Along a similar line, you can enable whether or not you'd like to share analytics with Formlabs. Doing so will help us in improving our products, and it also will help the services team provide you quicker resolutions if any issues arise. You have two options here. First, you can share the print logs, which is only data related to the printer performance being uploaded. So with just this, the printer will not be uploading any model data or images. And the second is also allowing post-print photos. This is when the printer will automatically capture a photo at the end of the print, and then they can send it to Formlabs using the photos to improve printer performance and troubleshoot any issues. By default, the first is enabled and the second is disabled. So it's completely optional as to whether or not you would like to have these enabled, but just know that if you do choose to enable them, it will help us just better service you in the future. All right, let's move on. Having a level printer is necessary in order for prints to complete successfully. So included in your box for your printer is a leveling disc. This goes around the feet of the printer and helps you to twist the feet more easily in order to raise or lower the printer at those certain points. This notch here is where the foot will sit when you insert the disc under the printer. And so those notches are what grab the foot and allow you to twist it comfortably with that leveling disc. On the screen here to the right, we have a diagram of essentially which feet are the problem. And so you can see in the middle, it's kind of like the bubble of a leveling tool. And we want that bubble to be more centered. That will turn green when it has been leveled properly. As we can see here in the top right, we can see that foot is not properly leveled. So I'm going to head to the back of the printer and use the disc. To do this, I'm sliding this leveling disc to where the foot is, and I'm sliding it all the way on. You can see I'm close to having it being leveled, so I'm just going to give it a twist in the direction that it recommends. We're twisting this way. Right. So with that, the printer is leveled. And so after rotating the foot, we can see that the center bubble is green. It's a little bit to the side, but as long as it's green, the printer will complete print successfully. And so now the onboarding steps are going to be walking us through inserting consumables to prepare us for printing. There are 5 accessories that we need in order to print successfully with the 4L. The first is the resin tank, then 2 resin cartridges, a build platform, and the mixer arm that will sit inside the resin tank throughout printing. The resin tank is where the resin is housed once it's been dispensed from the resin cartridge during the printing process. It comes with a lid to prevent any debris or ambient light from affecting the liquid resin when it is outside the printer. The clear tank film allows light to pass through the bottom of the tank during the printing process, which allows the resin to then be cured selectively, turning the liquid to solid once the light touches the liquid resin. To insert the resin tank, we're going to open the printer door. We're going to pick up the tank by the 2 handles on either side so that we're not touching the film on the bottom and contaminating it by leaving any finger smudges. And we're going to rest the tank on the front of the printer and slide the tank back into the printer like so. You can see that it's settled a little bit and made a little chime, which is how we know that the printer recognizes that a tank has been inserted and that it's been fully inserted enough. The last step here is to lock it in place with the latches on either side. And now our tank has been fully inserted and is ready for the printing process. Next, we're going to insert the mixer into the resin tank, which activates throughout the printing process to keep the resin well mixed and uniform throughout the print. Looking at the mixer, this is the mixer arm that's going to lie in the resin tank. And then this is the mixer mount with a lock. And so when we insert it, we will put this portion into the mount that is at the bottom of the resin tank here, and we'll lock it into place by closing that blue latch there. So with that, the mixer is locked into place. Next, we're going to be inserting a clean build platform. The build platform is the surface with which your print will form on. When inserted into the printer, it will descend into the resin tank, wait there as the resin is cured when exposed to light, and then raise up with each layer to form the next layer, and repeat the process over and over again. This build platform has been well loved and well used, and so it has some scrapes on the surface, but I wanted to show this to you so that you could know what to expect when you remove prints from your build platform in the future. The scrapes on the build platform help the parts adhere more strongly to the build platform. To insert the build platform, we're going to open the door again. And with the latch of the build platform to the unlock position, we're going to use the handles, align the center of the build platform to that lower opening, and slide it back until we hear the chime from the printer again. Once it's all the way back, we are going to lock that build platform in place by sliding that slot over to the right. Lastly, we will be inserting a resin cartridge into our printer. The resin cartridge is how your printer adds additional resin throughout the printing process. The resin cartridge has a bite valve on the bottom that the printer will engage with in order to dispense the resin, as well as a vent cap on top that we open when we are preparing to print, and when we're finished printing and there is still resin left in the cartridge, we'll close for storage to ensure that nothing can drip out when out of the printer. When working with the 4L, 2 resin cartridges are required to be inserted into the printer in order for a print to begin. The only time you will not need 2 cartridges to start a print with your 4L is anytime you're using the resin pumping system. So as we're getting ready to print, here we want to make sure that the build platform is always clean and there's no obstructions on it, and the mixer has been fully locked into the tank. It's also important in your pre-print checks to ensure that the type of resin in your resin cartridge aligns with the type of resin in your resin tank. Since this is our first print on this printer and the resin tank is empty, that's not a concern. But once the resin is dispensed into the tank, the printer will assign a resin type to this tank. And so going forward, if we want to print again with this resin tank, we'll always want to ensure that the resin type is matching the resin in the cartridge. I'm going to be printing with fast model today, and so this resin tank will become a fast model tank and can only be used with fast model resin cartridges going forward. The last bonus screen is prompting you to add your printer to your dashboard account. Dashboard is a tool that you can use online for tracking your print progression, monitoring your inventory, things like that. Following the instructions here will help you to add the printer to your dashboard account if you have one, but note that this does require an internet connection in order to utilize this feature. So we're going to skip this step for now. All right, and our Form 4L is now ready to print. So I'm going to close that window, and we've got to the main screen now. So while we're still interfacing with the touchscreen, I want to call out updating your printer. Formlabs regularly releases new firmwares for our printers, and your printer will automatically check for one and typically will prompt you to update your firmware when one has been released. So when that happens, if you have the moment to update your firmware, we always recommend doing it as soon as you can so that you can remain up to date on the newest settings that we have for optimizing your printers. And so if you're not prompted on the screen, you can also check in your settings menu and then hit firmware updates to prompt your printer to search for one. And here you can turn on automatic updates or update to the available firmware version. Back to the home screen, here we can see the preprint checks that are necessary to complete prior to running a print on your printer. So not only must we check to ensure that they are ready to go, but the printer must also be able to detect things like the resin tank and the resin cartridge in order to begin a print. So the printer can detect that a cartridge has been inserted, but the printer is asking us for a manual confirmation that the tank has been inserted with a mixer, which we have done. I'm going to check that off, as well as the build platform that we inserted earlier. Here you can also see the serial name of your unit. So Formlabs uses a serial name instead of a serial number because we find that it's easier to talk about your printers if you call in for service than listing off a long string of numbers. We can reference them by name. And those are always going to be in the format of adjective animal. So for example, the printer that I'm working with here is Subtle Seahorse. So now that we've confirmed all of these checks on the touchscreen, when we're ready to send a print to the printer will actually automatically start the print for us because we've done all the work to make it ready for printing. Now, since this is our first print with this tank in this 4L, we do recommend priming the resin tank by manually pouring a full cartridge into the resin tank. This will help to circumvent any long fill times from the printer before starting a print. In general, working with liquid resin, we recommend always wearing nitrile gloves so that you can protect your skin from the liquid resin. If you do happen to get resin on your skin at any point, it's not a big deal. We just recommend that you go and wash your hands with warm, soapy water to remove it. In those instances as well, do not use hand sanitizer to remove the liquid resin, as that's kind of akin to the isopropyl alcohol that we use to dissolve the liquid resin in the wash process. And so it can create a bit of a reaction to the skin. So sticking to warm, soapy water is going to be ideal for removing resin. So to do this, we're going to open the printer door. Using the cap on the top of the cartridge, we can fully remove this and then pour the resin directly into the resin tank, like so. Due to how much resin the 4L can take, as well as just in general to optimize printing efficiency, we recommend having at least 2 to 3 weeks worth of material available at any time. The second button here on our touchscreen is the queue section. Here's where your jobs will appear when you upload them to the printer. And so you can see any upcoming prints that have been added to the queue that are waiting to be printed, as well as a history of past prints. And so you can go back to an older print and rerun it again right from the queue if you'd like to. Next, we have the maintenance menu of the touchscreen, which has been broken down into two sections, both now and later. And this is just to denote which maintenance features we recommend doing presently in order to maintain print success, or any upcoming maintenance that you can expect to come soon. And then lastly, we have the settings menu, which is just where you can access some additional features. And so with all these steps completed, our printer is now ready to receive a print file. For any Formlabs printer, you'll prepare your 3D model for printing in our slicing software known as Preform. We'll be covering the steps to do so in a different video. Once you've done all the work to set up your print in Preform, you can add your printer to your Preform software by going to the Job Setup window in the top right-hand corner, by either searching for your printer at the search bar at the top, maybe it might be auto-populating in the list below, or you can manually add your printer in the top right corner there. This will prompt you for the IP address for your printer. The IP address for your printer can be found in the connectivity menu on the printer touchscreen. So I'm going to select Settle Seahorse, hit apply, and now that we've connected the printer to our Preform, we can go ahead and upload our ready to print model by hitting print now in the bottom right corner. Preform is in the process of uploading the job to the printer now. Once it is finished, we will see it in the queue. But since we've also completed all of our pre-print checks, the printer will start printing automatically, which is awesome. The printer during this time, as it's doing the pre-print checks, will report any issues or errors to the touchscreen, as well as any that occur throughout the print. A common one that can occur if you're printing a very large print on the 4L is the cartridge low warning. The cartridge low warning will occur if you do not have enough resin in the cartridge that are currently loaded in to complete the print. In these instances, you should anticipate that a cartridge will need to be replaced during that printing process. So some of the pre-print checks that the printer completes is double checking if there's any obstructions remaining on the build platform by using the mixer to scrape across that surface and detect any. It is also mixing the resin to make sure it's nice and homogeneous at the start of the print, things like that. Once the printer is ready to print, the build platform is going to lower completely into the resin tank, remain there so that the printer can turn on the LPU below the resin tank and expose the liquid resin to light. It will then lift the build platform up to then peel that layer of newly cured resin off of the tank film at the bottom there. Then it will repeat the process of lowering the build platform back down with just enough space between that previously printed layer and the bottom of the resin tank to then cure another layer of resin and repeat that over and over until we have a fully three-dimensional part. 3D printing is taking 2D images and stacking them on top of each other to form a 3D part. It's pretty cool. Occasionally, after a layer has been completed in the printer, the mixer will also pass across like we're seeing here, usually only once or twice depending on the material, to just clear out any minor inconsistencies that may have formed directly to the tank and clear the optical path for that light to then consistently hit the new layer of the print. If you're interested in more information on the printing process for the 4L, you can check out the print process video that we have for the Form 4, as they use similar printing engines. Alrighty, so now we have a finished print in our 4L. In order to take the print out of the printer, we're going to make sure that we have gloves on before we do so. This is because when parts are finished printing, they are going to have a layer of liquid resin still clinging to the outside of it, as it's been dunked into liquid resin over and over. In order to protect ourselves from the liquid resin, we're going to wear some gloves. In my example, it has already been washed, just for easy demonstration in this tutorial. But you can expect drips of resin to be dripping off of your print. So in order to take this out without having any resin drip outside of your printer, we're going to pull the build platform out and rotate it inwards and essentially try to catch any drips and kind of work with gravity there. Alrighty, and so this is what our finished part looks like. And so the first step we want to do once we've completed our print is to remove that liquid resin that I mentioned that is going to be clinging to the part. We do this by using a wash solvent like isopropyl alcohol that can dissolve the resin and completely remove it. For this example, I'm going to be using our Form Wash L, which is an automated washing solution that can really help to speed up the post-processing process and kind of make it a little bit more hands-off for you. The Wash L will then hold that build platform in place as it submerges the part into the washing solvent that you've chosen, and will agitate the solvent within it using an impeller. You can set the length of time that you'd like your part to be washed, as every material has a specific wash time that Formlabs recommends. This allows the liquid resin to be removed from the surface of the part efficiently without having the parts be over-soaked in the solvent for too long. And so the part will automatically lift up when the time is up and will begin an air dry process, which is necessary before we can post-cure the parts. I'd like to note on the Wash L as well that it has adjustable arms that you can bring in to accommodate smaller build platforms of other Formlabs products if you'd like, as well as lower it down if you have a smaller part or your Wash L is full of less solvent and not fully filled. It also comes with a basket, so if you decide to remove your part from the build platform or from its supports prior to washing, you could put it right in the basket and that will also descend into the solvent and equally wash as well. All right, so with all that said, let's go ahead and get the wash started. And so while that part is washing, I'm going to use this example here to remove the part from the rafts and the supports, as well as remove it from the build platform. Again, whether that is before you want to wash your part or after you've washed it and you're preparing it for curing. To do this, I have a flat scraper that is really thin and can get under the raft really easily, as well as these flush cutters that I find super helpful for removing some difficult supports or sometimes just getting some purchase underneath the raft, which can really kind of suction to the build platform and make it a little difficult sometimes. But prior to using those, I want to call out that we've done a lot of work to fine-tune our support structures and the way they connect with the model to make part removal from them super easy. We've got fine touch tips here. When you have a pretty durable part, you know, there's not too many fragile features that are thin and might also break during this process. It can be really helpful to kind of just hold the build platform in one hand, or even this kind of the supports themselves. And so with like a little bit of a twisting and pulling motion, you can remove it really easy like that. So my part looks great, but I still have this on my build platform and I really like to use my build platform. So another thing I'm going to utilize here is the build platform jig, which is super helpful for just keeping your build platform stationary while you're doing these steps. You have two ways of using it, kind of this sideways method by inserting the feet here into the outer holes, or you can rotate it to a more vertical or perpendicular position like so. But again, it holds the feet nicely for you. If you're kind of chiseling away or kind of putting some force behind the part removal that you're doing. I want to note here that anytime you're using the scrapers or the spatulas, always be directing that force away from you. And it's not going to be a good idea to have it kind of angled towards yourself in case your hand slips. So I'm going to start here first by demonstrating the flush cutters. So I'm going to put this flat side flush on the build platform like that. I'm putting the points of the cutters up underneath the lip of the raft, and I'm just going to give them a squeeze. And this will give you a bit of force, but they'll eventually force their way underneath the raft, and it will start that process of lifting up from the surface of the build platform. And so by doing this at a few points around the raft, you start to break the raft and the seal that the raft has formed to the build platform. And so you can see now by doing that, I've got this little bit, it's kind of more loose here. And so that's enough purchase, I'd say, that I can then take the scraper and slide that underneath. And so once you've got the scraper underneath the raft, you can kind of curve your way around and just work around the raft to lift up the other areas. Okay, I want to rotate, because I'm finding there's one little area that's a little difficult for me to get to that far. I'm being a little intentional as to how I'm approaching this so that I am minimizing how much I'm breaking the raft. I personally find it easier to essentially keep the raft in one piece and slide gently underneath the surface so it can kind of all pop off together. Because in other cases, if it breaks, you might have to start the process over again of trying to lift up a different area of the part to be able to get underneath it again. That said, there have been parts that I've removed just using the flush cutters, and it'll pop off by itself as well. So try whatever works best for you. There's no right or wrong way, but there are some ways that might be a little bit more efficient for you. And there we have it. Raft removed. Now, that's not everything. I want to call out here, I still have just these two parts here, this one and this one. That needs to be removed before we're able to print again on this build platform. So again, in order to get at those, I'm going to use the flush cutters because I find them a bit easier. Awesome. And so lastly, what I would recommend doing here is taking some isopropyl alcohol and some paper towels and wiping down the surface of the build platform so that there is no liquid resin or residue left on the build platform and it is ready to print again. That's less important if you're going to be printing with the same exact material, but it is very important for if you are going to be changing your resin type. Here's the other example print that we just washed without supports. I'll point out here, there are still a couple that might get printed more internally of the print. When that happens, you can take the flush cutters, or if it's even more of a delicate area, an X-Acto knife and slice away at any remaining supports that might be present on the print. And there we have it. And so those were the steps to remove the parts from the standard build platform, but you may have a build platform flex. And so if you're curious about the process of removing parts from a build platform flex, please check out our support site for resources on that. All right, and so lastly, we have our post-cure step. Most of our resins require some additional exposure to light and heat after printing in order to obtain optimal material properties. And so in those scenarios, we recommend using the Form Cure, which is our automated solution for post-curing, which carefully controls some additional heating and light exposure that you can fine-tune to your material to really optimize their properties. Programmed into the Form Curel touchscreen, we have a preset profile for every resin that Formlabs offers. Custom profiles can be made for additional materials as well, where you can manually tweak the time and temperature settings there. I'd like to note that although I removed the supports prior to curing, you can also cure with supports on. The decision as to whether or not you remove the supports is pretty dependent on the geometry of your 3D model. In some instances, removing all of the supports does allow for an unobstructed exposure of light to all sides of the part, but keeping supports on can help to provide a little bit more support as the part gets reheated. In that warming process, some warping can occur if the part is quite thin, and so having supports there can benefit in those instances. There is a Goldilocks approach as well, though. You can remove some of the supports and keep others on to kind of clear out a bit of the forest of supports that you may have on your parts, while still allowing for a bit more stability and that support as the part gets reheated again. The last thing I'd like to mention here is that although the supports are light touch and very easy to remove from the part themselves, you will likely still have a bit of texture or support marks left behind on your model. In those instances, some light sanding with some sandpaper or a rotary tool can get rid of those support marks and leave behind a really smooth finish if that is the aesthetic that you're looking for. For tips and tricks for finishing your part beyond the post-processing that I've shown you here today, again, check out our website for additional resources. As for all of the resources that I've mentioned today, I'll have starting points linked in the description below as well. If you're looking for detailed step-by-step guides on everything that we covered here today, those are also found on our website, support.formlabs.com. If you find that you're running into any difficulty, do not hesitate to reach out to our wonderful services team, as they'd love to make sure that you're getting set up right and getting started on the right foot. Thanks so much for watching, and happy printing.